Barnaby looked at me. I looked at him. The lock looked at both of us, glinting in the aggressive cheerfulness of the Saturday morning sun, silently communicating its deep and abiding contempt for our existence. He let out a soft, mournful woof, a sound that somehow combined the sonic properties of a deflating air mattress and a disappointed sigh. It was the sound of a 120-pound Newfoundland whose entire purpose in life, retrieving a weighted training dummy from the deep end of a swimming pool, had just been thwarted by a piece of hardened steel that could have been scavenged from a decommissioned battleship. I reached out and gave the lock a token rattle. It didn't budge. Of course it didn't. This wasn't your standard issue master lock you'd use on a high school gym locker. This was a Series 7000 Abloy high-security padlock, shackled to the gate with a length of case-hardened chain thick enough to moor an aircraft carrier. The whole setup was designed to keep a T-Rex from escaping Jurassic Park. And all of it, every last ounce of absurdly over-engineered security, was because Brenda, our glorious HOA president, had declared war on us over the chemical composition of pool water. "Well, buddy," I said, scratching Barnaby behind his giant, furry ears. "It appears our neighborly request for community access has been escalated to a Cold War-level standoff." Barnaby responded by drooling on my shoe, his own form of silent protest. This whole mess had started 3 weeks earlier, with an email. As a volunteer handler for the county's K-9 search and rescue team, I'm required to keep Barnaby certified in a number of disciplines. He was a rock star at tracking and rubble searches, but his water rescue certification was about to expire. And since we live in a landlocked suburb of Austin, Texas, the 50-foot community pool was the only body of water within a reasonable distance that was deep enough for the test. I'm an IT project manager by trade. I live and breathe process, documentation, and risk mitigation. So I approached this not as a guy wanting to use the pool, but as a formal project with stakeholders and deliverables. I drafted an email so polite and professional it could have run for public office to HOA Board Members Board at oakhavenestates.com from Mark Chamberlain, m.chamberlain@email.com. Subject, request for community pool access for K-9, SAR certification. Dear Oakhaven Estates HOA Board, I hope this email finds you well. My name is Mark Chamberlain, and I am a resident at 112 Arbor Lane. I am also a certified handler with the Travis County K-9 Search and Rescue Volunteer Unit. My partner is K-9 Barnaby, a Newfoundland specializing in water rescue. Barnaby's biennial water rescue certification is scheduled for Saturday, October 26th. To complete this certification, we are required to perform a series of timed retrievals in a controlled body of water with a minimum depth of 8 feet. The community pool is an ideal and convenient location for this vital public safety training. I would like to formally request a 2-hour window of access from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. on that Saturday. The training involves me throwing a sanitized 10-pound weighted dummy into the deep end and Barnaby performing a safe retrieval. There is no live victim involved. For your reference, I have attached the following documents: my official SR handler credentials, a copy of our team's $2 million liability insurance policy, a letter from the National Association for Search and Rescue, NASAR, outlining the certification requirements. We are, of course, happy to work around any scheduled community events and will ensure there is minimal disruption to residents. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter, which contributes directly to the safety and well-being of the wider community. Sincerely, Mark Chamberlain and K-9 Barnaby. I hit send, feeling confident. I had anticipated every possible objection. I had provided documentation. I had used phrases like vital public safety training. What could possibly go wrong? The answer arrived in my inbox exactly 17 minutes later. It was from Brenda, of course, CCing the entire board. To Mark Chamberlain, CC, HOA board members. Subject, request for community pool access for K9 SAR certification. Mark, the board has reviewed your request. Unfortunately, we cannot accommodate it. Allowing a K9 of that size into the pool presents a number of significant issues, including unknown liabilities, the potential for fur and dander to irreparably clog the filtration system, and the psychological distress it may cause to other residents who may be afraid of large, wet dogs. The pool is for human residents only. The decision is final. Regards, Brenda McAllister, President, Oakhaven Estates HOA. I stared at the screen. Irreparably clog? Did she think Barnaby was a Wookiee who molted his entire coat on contact with chlorine? And psychological distress? The most distressing thing about Barnaby was his ability to weaponize his drool with pinpoint accuracy. My project manager brain went into overdrive. She hadn't said no. She had presented a list of risks. And risks can be mitigated. I took a deep breath and began to type a rebuttal. A beautiful, point-by-point dismantling of her argument, but before I could finish, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my next-door neighbor, Frank. Saw the email chain. The Dragon Lady of Lawn Violations is in fine form today. Frank was a 75-year-old retired corporate lawyer who had moved into the neighborhood a year before I did. He'd spent 40 years dismantling bad faith arguments from Fortune 500 companies, and he viewed Brenda's reign as HOA president with the same mixture of professional disdain and personal amusement. I walked out into my front yard, where he was pretending to trim his rose bushes. "You see that garbage?" I asked, gesturing vaguely toward Brenda's house down the street. Frank chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "Son, you're trying to use logic on a textbook petty tyrant. Logic is your enemy. You're not dealing with a rational actor. You're dealing with a bureaucrat whose only joy in life comes from saying no. You can't win by asking. You have to win by telling." "What does that even mean?" "It means you're playing her game," he said, snipping a perfectly healthy rosebud with a vicious thwack. "You need to find the rules that she has to follow, not the ones she gets to make up. Go read the bylaws. All of them. There's always a loophole." I went back inside, a new sense of purpose bubbling in my chest. I finished my rebuttal anyway, just for the satisfaction of it. I addressed the liability, again pointing to the $2 million insurance policy. The filtration system, offering to personally skim the pool before and after, and to pay for a professional filter cleaning service out of my own pocket. And the psychological distress, proposing a time when the pool was historically empty and offering to post large, friendly signs announcing the training. Brenda's reply was even shorter this time. "The matter is closed." The next day, the keypad on the pool gate was disabled, and the comically oversized lock and chain had appeared. She followed it up with a neighborhood-wide email about necessary security upgrades to protect our shared community assets from unauthorized use. She hadn't just closed the matter, she had welded it shut. But as I stood there with Barnaby staring at that ridiculous lock, Frank's words echoed in my head. You have to win by telling. Brenda had just made the biggest mistake of her petty, tyrannical career. She thought she was ending the game. She had just started a new one. And I was about to write the rules. My inner project manager, which had been dormant and fuming for 24 hours, roared to life. This was no longer about getting permission. This was about asserting a right. The objective had changed. The project charter was being rewritten. I sat down at my desk, Barnaby's head resting on my foot, his snoring providing a soothing, bass-heavy soundtrack. I opened a new folder on my computer desktop and named it Project Obstructed Egress Remediation. I created a series of subfolders: Communications, Bylaw Analysis, vendor quotes, and evidence. Frank was right. I had been fighting on her turf. It was time to drag the battlefield onto mine. My turf was documentation, process, and malicious compliance. I pulled up the Oakhaven Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the sacred 150-page scroll that governed everything from the acceptable shade of beige for your garage door to the maximum allowable height of a garden gnome. I poured a large coffee and started reading. For an hour, it was a mind-numbing journey through legalese and pedantry. And then I found them. Two beautiful, glorious, shining clauses nestled deep within the document. The first was Bylaw 7.1a, right of ingress and egress. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that all members in good standing shall have the right to access and use all common areas and community facilities during designated hours. As a dues-paying member, I had a right to get through that gate. But the second one? Oh, the second one was the Mona Lisa. It was the checkmate in 3 moves I'd been looking for. Bylaw 1.3b, Emergency Access Points. It read, all gates or access points designated as emergency access routes by the original site plan must remain clear and immediately operable by standard fire and rescue personnel equipment. No non-standard or secondary locking mechanisms may be affixed to these access points without unanimous, written pre-approval from the Travis County Fire Marshal's office. My heart started beating faster. I scrambled to the HOA website's public documents section and pulled up the original architectural site plan from 1998. And there it was, in crisp, clear detail. The pool gate, marked with a bold, unmistakable EA for emergency access. Brenda hadn't just locked me out. She had created a serious safety violation. She had blocked an emergency exit in a public space, and she'd done it with a non-standard lock. I took a screenshot, saved it to the evidence folder, and felt a grin spread across my face. Now I needed a team. My project plan required a vendor. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Local Locksmith Austin. But locksmiths were too subtle. This wasn't a job for a pick. This was a job for a statement. I refined my search. Gate Repair Austin Heavy Duty. The first result was a company with a name that radiated pure, unadulterated competence. Gus's Gutter and Gate. I dialed the number. A gravelly voice answered on the second ring. Gus's. You break it, I fix it. What's the problem? Hi, I said, trying to sound professional and not like a man plotting a coup against his HOA. I have a gate that's been, let's call it involuntarily secured. I need it opened. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. Involuntarily secured? Son, did you lock yourself out, or did your wife lock you in? Neither, I said, a smile creeping into my voice. It's an HOA issue. The chuckle turned into a full-throated laugh. Oh, it's an HOA job. Say no more. That's a whole different category of work. What's she made of? An Abloy 7000, I think, and a grade 100 alloy chain. Gus let out a low whistle. Hoo boy, someone's not messing around. Well, for that I'll need to bring the special key. My boy Leo has been wanting to test out the new DeWalt angle grinder. We can be there in an hour to give you a quote. Exactly 55 minutes later, a glorious old Ford F-150, weathered and scarred from 1,000 battles against suburban entropy, rumbled to a stop in front of my house. 2 men got out. The first was Gus, a man in his late 60s with a magnificent white mustache and hands like catcher's mitts. The second was Leo, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20 with wide, earnest eyes. I led them to the pool gate. Gus took one look at the lock and let out a sound of pure professional admiration. Well, I'll be, he said, stroking his mustache. She really doesn't want you in there, does she? That's a beautiful piece of hardware. Shame we gotta cut it off. Leo just stared, his mouth slightly agape. That's bigger than the one on my grandpa's gun safe. I need a formal quote, I explained, for emergency obstruction removal services. I need it itemized. 1 line for cutting the lock, 1 for cutting the chain, and a service call fee. Gus's eyes twinkled. He understood immediately. This wasn't just a job, this was theater. You got it, boss. Emergency obstruction removal. I like the sound of that. I'll even throw in a line item for site compliance verification. He pulled out a notepad and scribbled on it with a carpenter's pencil. He handed me the paper. It was perfect. Gus had a natural gift for bureaucratic language. He'd even added a small, official-looking logo he'd clearly drawn himself. Leo, meanwhile, was still just looking from the lock to me, a look of terrified awe on his face as if he were in the presence of a revolutionary leader. I thanked them, told them I'd be in touch to schedule the work, and walked back to my house holding the quote like a winning lottery ticket. It was time to draft my masterpiece, my declaration of war. It wasn't a request, it was a notification. I logged back into my email, attached the quote from Gus, the screenshot of the bylaw, the architectural site plan, and for good measure, a picture of Barnaby sitting patiently in his official rescue vest, looking both heroic and slightly dopey. I addressed it to the entire HOA board and blind copied the general neighborhood mailing list. Then I wrote the subject line that would echo through the annals of Oak Haven Estates history. Subject: urgent. Notice of safety violation and scheduled remediation for pool emergency access gate. Bylaw 11.3b. Dear board members, it has come to my attention that the designated emergency access gate for the community pool area, as identified in the official site plan attached, has been fitted with a non-standard, non-compliant secondary locking mechanism. This is in direct and serious violation of HOA Bylaw 11.3b, which mandates that all emergency access routes must remain clear and immediately operable. As my K-9 unit is certified for emergency response, and given that every second counts in a water rescue scenario, ensuring this access point is clear is a matter of immediate public safety. A blocked emergency gate represents a significant liability to the entire community. Therefore, please be advised that on Saturday, October 26th, at 10 a.m., we will be proceeding with our previously scheduled and time-sensitive water rescue certification training. Coinciding with this, a licensed and insured contractor has been hired to remove the obstruction and restore the gate to full, compliant, and safe operation. Please find the attached invoice for this necessary maintenance service. As stipulated in Bylaw 14.2, Maintenance of Common Areas, the cost for this remediation will be covered by the HOA's General Maintenance Fund. I will be sure to forward the final receipt for your records. We look forward to seeing our community restored to full safety compliance this Saturday. Sincerely, Mark Chamberlain and K-9 Barnaby, 112 Arbor Lane. I hovered over the send button for a single, delicious second. Then I clicked it. The digital bomb was away. The air on Saturday morning was thick with anticipation. It was 9:55 a.m. I stood by the pool gate, sipping coffee from a thermos, the very picture of calm. Barnaby sat patiently by my side, his big brown eyes fixed on the shimmering blue water just beyond the fence, his tail giving a slow, rhythmic thump-thump-thump against the pavement. He was ready to work. Across the street, a small crowd of about 15 neighbors had gathered. Some were on their porches, others were pretending to be weeding their flower beds. It was the most excitement Oak Haven Estates had seen since a rogue squirrel had chewed through the main cable line during the Super Bowl. Frank gave me a subtle thumbs up from his porch, a co-conspirator's salute. Right on cue, Gus's glorious old Ford F-150 rumbled down the street, its engine a familiar, comforting growl. It pulled up to the curb with the gravity of a landing craft hitting the beach on D-Day. Gus and Leo got out, both wearing pristine, high-visibility work vests and safety glasses. Gus was carrying a pair of bolt cutters so large they looked like they could snip a telephone pole in half. Leo, bless his heart, was cradling the angle grinder like it was a holy relic, a sacred instrument of justice. "Mornin', Mark," Gus said, his voice booming slightly in the quiet air. "Beautiful day for a little community improvement, ain't it?" "It's a perfect day, Gus," I replied, taking another sip of coffee. Leo looked nervously from me to the growing crowd, then down the street. "Are you sure about this, Gus?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "That lady, she looks really, really mad." I followed his gaze. There she was. Brenda. She wasn't walking. She was power walking, her arms pumping, her visor pulled down low like a warrior's helmet. Her phone was already out, held aloft, recording her approach. She was a Category 5 Karen, and she was about to make landfall. She came to a halt about 10 feet away, her face a thunderous shade of crimson. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, her voice vibrating with righteous indignation. "This is destruction of property. This is vandalism. I am calling the police." I took out my own phone and started recording. "Hello, Brenda," I said, my voice calm and even. "As per my email notification sent to you and the entire board on Wednesday, we're simply remedying a safety violation you created. These gentlemen are licensed and insured, and they're here to restore this gate to compliance with our bylaws." "Your email means nothing," she sputtered. "I am the president. You cannot authorize this. I will have you sued. I will have you fined. I will have your dog impounded." The threat against Barnaby was a step too far. My calm demeanor hardened. "You will do no such thing, Brenda. You are acting outside the scope of your authority and in direct violation of Bylaw 11.3b. These gentlemen have been contracted to perform necessary maintenance." "This isn't maintenance, it's a crime!" Gus stepped forward, a gentle smile on his face. "Ma'am, with all due respect, a blocked emergency exit is a major code violation. According to Travis County fire regulations, a lock like this on a designated egress point? That could get the whole HOA a 5-figure fine if the fire marshal were to, say, receive an anonymous tip." He let that hang in the air for a moment. Brenda's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was so flustered she didn't even hear the approaching sirens until the 2 police cruisers pulled up and parked behind Gus's truck. Officers Miller and Davis got out. Miller was the classic seen-it-all cop, a man whose expression suggested he was just a few hundred petty disputes away from a peaceful retirement. Davis was younger, more by the book, but he had a distinct glint of humor in his eyes that he was trying, and failing, to suppress. Brenda rushed towards them like they were the cavalry. "Officers, thank goodness! This man," she pointed a trembling finger at me, "is trying to destroy HOA property. I want him arrested. I want to press charges." Officer Miller let out a sigh. It was a profound sound, a sigh that contained the weight of every domestic disturbance, every noise complaint, every cat stuck in a tree call he'd ever responded to. "Okay, ma'am. Let's everybody just take a deep breath. What's the story here?" Brenda launched into a frantic, one-sided tirade about unauthorized work, rogue contractors, and my menacing, pool-clogging dog. Miller listened with the patient disinterest of a man waiting for a pot of water to boil. When she finally wound down, he turned his tired eyes to me. "And your side of it?" I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked over and handed him the evidence folder I'd prepared. "It's all in there, officer," I said. The initial request, the email chain, the relevant bylaws highlighted, the architectural plan, the contractor's quote and insurance, and my SR credentials. I'm just a resident trying to ensure our community follows its own safety rules. Miller took the folder. He leaned against the hood of his cruiser and began to read. His expression slowly shifted from one of terminal boredom to one of faint amusement. He read a passage, looked up at Brenda, then back at the page. He grunted. He then passed the folder to Officer Davis, who began to read. Davis's attempt to maintain a professional demeanor was less successful. His lips were twitching, and he had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from smiling. Finally, Miller looked up at Brenda, holding a page from the folder. "Ma'am, is this your signature on this HOA bylaw document from last year's annual meeting?" He pointed to the bottom of the page containing Bylaw 11.3b. "And did you receive this email notification 3 days ago?" Brenda sputtered. "Well, yes, but he can't just—" Miller held up a hand, cutting her off. "Ma'am, as far as I can see, no laws are being broken here. This is a civil matter between you and your homeowners association. He's a resident, he pays his dues, and he's citing your own rules to remedy what appears to be a legitimate safety concern. Our hands are tied. We can't stop him. You'll have to take it up in an HOA meeting or with your lawyers." He then turned to me. A flicker of a smile touched his lips. "Try to keep it clean. I don't want to have to come back here for a noise complaint." The officers got back in their cruisers, leaving Brenda standing on the sidewalk, speechless. She looked utterly betrayed by the very system she had tried to weaponize against me. I looked at Gus. I gave him a slow, deliberate nod. Gus grinned, a magnificent, mustache-bristling grin. He turned to his apprentice. "All right, Leo," he boomed. "Your time to shine, kid." Leo, who had been watching the entire exchange with the wide-eyed wonder of a kid at a superhero movie, was now filled with a sense of righteous purpose. He looked like he'd just been deputized by the president. He flipped down his safety visor, plugged the angle grinder into the portable generator on Gus's truck, and hit the switch. The high-pitched whine started, building in an instant to a piercing, mechanical scream. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of bureaucratic nonsense meeting 11,000 RPMs of pure, unadulterated consequence. Leo lowered the spinning disc to the shackle of the lock. Sparks flew in a glorious, incandescent rooster tail, a 4th of July celebration of petty revenge. The smell of hot metal filled the air. The neighbors were all on their feet now, phones out, recording the magnificent spectacle. With a final, sharp clang, the shackle of the abloy padlock was severed. It fell to the concrete with a pathetic thud. For good measure, Gus stepped forward with the giant bolt cutters and, with a single, satisfying snip, cut the offending chain in two. He pushed the gate. It swung open with a gentle, welcoming creak. A smattering of applause broke out from the assembled neighbors. Victory. I gave a polite nod to the departing police cars. "Thank you for your time, officers." Then I walked over to Gus and shook his hand firmly. "Send that invoice directly to the HOA, please. And feel free to add a 15% difficult client surcharge." Gus clapped me on the back, his laughter echoing in the now quiet cul-de-sac. "Will do, Mark, will do. It's been a pleasure doing business with you." Leo, his work done, looked like he had just single-handedly liberated a small country. He gave me a shy, triumphant nod. With the stage now clear, I turned to my partner, who had been sitting with the patience of a saint through the entire drama. I unhooked Barnaby's leash. "Okay, buddy," I said, my voice filled with pride. "Let's go to work." Barnaby needed no further encouragement. He trotted through the open gate, his tail wagging furiously, and stood at the edge of the pool, looking at me expectantly. I walked to the deep end, holding the weighted, canvas-covered dummy. "Ready?" I called. He barked in response. I swung the dummy back and tossed it into the center of the deep end. It hit the water with a heavy splash. "Barnaby, find it!" he launched himself into the water. It wasn't a graceful dive. It was more of a controlled belly flop. A 120-pound cannonball of pure enthusiasm that sent a wave washing over the side. He paddled out with powerful, confident strokes, his massive head held high. He located the dummy, took it gently in his mouth, and began the steady, unwavering paddle back to the steps. The whole evolution was flawless. He was a professional. From the corner of my eye, I could see the watching neighbors. Their expressions were no longer just curious. They were charmed. They were seeing not just a big dog, but a working dog, a hero in training. I clicked my stopwatch, knelt down, and made a few official-looking notes on my own clipboard. A final, perfect, and silent jab at Brenda, who was still standing across the street, a statue of impotent fury. As expected, the neighborhood email server exploded later that afternoon. Brenda sent out a frantic, all-caps screed, trying to frame the morning's events as an act of violent vandalism and a personal attack on her authority. She called me a menace and a liability. I waited an hour for maximum effect, then hit reply all. My response was simple. I attached the 4K video I had taken on my phone, which captured the entire unedited encounter, from my calm explanation to Gus's commentary on fire codes to Officer Miller's final, validating judgment. I titled the email, Video Footage, Ensuring Community Safety and Bylaw Compliance. The digital tide turned instantly. An emergency HOA meeting was called for that evening, held on the lawn by the pool. It was, by all accounts, the most well-attended HOA meeting in the history of Oakhaven Estates. The entire neighborhood showed up. Brenda tried to take control, to read from a prepared statement about the sanctity of HOA property, but she had lost the room completely. Before she could get through her first paragraph, a woman from the next street over stood up. "Brenda, while we're on the topic of your authority," she said, her voice shaking with long-suppressed anger, "I'd like to know why I received a $50 fine because my son's birthday balloons, which were tied to our mailbox, were an unapproved color scheme." Another man stood up. "And I'd like to know why I got a warning letter because my trash cans were still at the curb at 7 p.m., 10 minutes after your arbitrary deadline." Suddenly, the floodgates were open. It was an avalanche of petty grievances, a chorus of Brenda stories. The holiday decoration fines, the lawn height warnings measured with a ruler, the angry notes left on cars parked perfectly legally on the street. It turned out I wasn't the only one she'd been terrorizing. I was just the first one to bring an angle grinder to a knife fight. Then Frank, the retired lawyer, stood up. He wasn't angry. He was calm, professional, and absolutely lethal. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily across the lawn, "this isn't just about balloons or trash cans. This is about liability. By knowingly and willfully blocking a designated emergency access gate, Brenda exposed every single one of us, as members of this HOA, to a massive potential lawsuit. If there had been an actual emergency, a fire, a medical incident, and first responders were delayed by even 30 seconds because of that illegal lock, the financial consequences for this community would have been catastrophic. Her actions were not just petty, they were reckless and legally indefensible. That was it, the final nail in the coffin of her reign. A motion was made to hold a vote of no confidence in her presidency. It passed almost unanimously. Another motion was made to approve payment for Gus's invoice, including the difficult client surcharge. That passed, too, with a smattering of applause. A month later, things were different. Frank had been reluctantly installed as the interim HOA president, a role he accepted on the condition that everyone leaves me the hell alone. His first official act was to remove the chain entirely, have a new commercial-grade keypad installed on the gate, and give the master code directly to the local fire department. Which brings me to tonight. The air is cool, and the pool is quiet, its surface like a sheet of dark glass under the soft glow of the underwater lights. I'm sitting on the edge, my feet dangling in the water. Barnaby, having just completed a flawless night training session, is resting beside me, his big wet head on my lap. He lets out a deep, happy, waterlogged sigh, the sound of a good boy who has done a good job. They say you shouldn't fight fire with fire. But I've learned that sometimes, when dealing with a petty tyrant who wields rules like a weapon, the only logical response is to fight their flimsy, made-up regulations with the beautiful, immutable laws of physics. Specifically, the physics of a high-velocity abrasive disk meeting hardened steel. And as I sit here, scratching my hero dog's ears, I knew, deep in my soul, that it was the best $250 our HOA had ever spent.